Welcome, everyone, to another amazing webinar for alternative healthcare careers. My name is Dr. Emma Shapiro. I'm a physical therapist, and I'm here with Dr. Aaron Hackett, who is a physical therapist, but he also wears many hats. He is a blogger, a wittypt.com, and he also is a utilization reviewer, amongst many other things. And I'm going to let him tell more about his amazing self in a minute. But basically, you are on a webinar to talk about how Aaron became a utilization reviewer and how you can as well. And many of you have posted a lot of amazing questions. And so we're going to try to get to as many of those questions as possible. So please stay on. And if you have any questions that we're not getting to, or you have any other issues or anything like that, on the right-hand side, you'll see chat. And so just type your message in there. And we may not get to that message immediately because we want to keep the natural flow of the webinar, but we promise we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So with that, let's get started. Welcome, Aaron. I would love for you to just quickly share how you got started in this career path, because I think that's the biggest question that people have is, how do I get started?
Sure. No, that's a great question, Emma. And first, thanks for letting me come on. I'm super excited to do this. I love telling people about what I do. And so, yeah, we'll just get right into it. So I am a physical therapist. Well, and before I get into it, if you guys hear any background noises, I do have 3 boys at home. They're a little bit older, so they tend to try and stay out of the way as much as they can. But hopefully there's no screaming or blood splurting into the screen. And we did just get some new baby chicks. We have a couple backyard chickens, and they were getting older, so we've got some new ones just last night. So they're pretty quiet, but they're small and fluffy, and so the kids are kind of excited about that.
That's nice.
But yeah, so I've been a physical therapist since 2006. I graduated from the University of Utah, where I live. I was a clinician or a clinical physical therapist, I should say. I'm still a clinician. Up until about 4 years ago, so almost 10 years, I had been doing traditional outpatient orthopedics with a privately owned company. I did, general orthopedics, post-surgical, back pain, neck pain, a lot of athletes. We did a lot of work with high schools and things like that. I was able to get involved in some aquatic therapy as well. We had a contract with a local pool. And I was able to do, kind of a lot of those things. From there, I transitioned to work with some friends out of school and did a lot of, still some orthopedics, but a lot of it was workers' compensation involved. Did a lot of on-site care, which was different. Going to the workplace, seeing people on their lunch break, and then sending them right back to the job that was hurting them. It was kind of an interesting dynamic, telling them all these things not to do, and then they just go do it again for another 4 hours. So, and then they laid me off, and that kind of gave me a little bit of time to think. I was getting very close to actually opening my own clinic. I had a contract on a location, and I just didn't feel good about it. Having kids at home and not knowing about health insurance or how I'd afford those things, I kind of chickened out of that. And I was able to find another job, again, doing workers' compensation. And this situation was quite a bit different too. Come to find out that most of our patient base came from one occupational medicine office. And over the years, I started to find out small little tidbits that really that company was owned by the occupational med doctor. So without having been told before, it was a physician-owned practice, which can be a good thing, can be a bad thing. The thing that really irritated me is that at the beginning, the therapist that hired me was very adamant that it was not a physician-owned clinic. So I felt like I had been lied to. And it was a lot of the care was, I guess to say it simply, a lot of the care was given to physical therapy aides. We just had people coming in so much, and there was so much to do. that a lot of times it was just handing someone off to an aide and say, go do this, go do this, go do this. And so over time, it was just, it wasn't a real ethical situation that I wanted to continue to face every day. But we kind of have to take a step back. During that time, I was also the reimbursement chairman for our state physical therapy association. I had decided to just run for that one year. The place that I had been working before, originally out of school, the owner was he had been a previous president, and he was really big into the state chapter and getting involved. So I thought I'd look into it. There was an opening for the reimbursement chairman, and I thought I'd go ahead and run, despite some other therapists saying, "Oh, that's a waste of your time. It's a stupid thing to do." I don't know why they were so negative towards it. But anyways, I decided to run anyways. I think mostly just to show those people that you're not going to tell me what to do. I'm going to do what I want to do, and see if it's a good experience. And so I had, they're 2-year terms, and I had won the first term, and then I ran again, and I won that term again. Now winning, if you ever have run for a state chapter position, you find out pretty soon that there's not a whole lot of competition. So saying that you won an election, I mean, I think both times I ran, I was only running against one other person. So it was a pretty good odds that, 2-to-1 odds at least that I'm going to win. While working as a therapist, then also doing that reimbursement chairman stuff, I was able to go to the national payment conferences the APTA puts on every year. Okay. We would have our board meetings, and then at the state level, we would also have a yearly payment session at one of our annual conferences, and it was my job to kind of coordinate that. So through doing all of that, I met a lot of different people that were in the reimbursement and payment areas. I even had some of those representatives come to our state chapter conferences. And really that's what led me to finding the person that helped me get the job I currently have now. Fast forward again to that workers' compensation where it was kind of a strange ethical situation. So once I had met that person that works in utilization review and management, I just on a whim, I had her card, and on a whim, I just emailed her and asked, what does it take to get into something like this? And so from there, we kind of started a dialogue. And after about 3 or 4 months, she had indicated that they were looking for someone, and she wondered if I was interested. And so from there, we transitioned from emails to phone calls, and she explained what everything is. And I thought, well, I'm in a situation where I don't like it. It's not ethical. And the owner, I can't trust him, so I'm not going to stick there. And, I had a lot of the care, it was, really fast paced. Workers' compensation can kind of burn you out really quickly, at least in that situation. So, and she had also presented it as an opportunity to where I might be able to work from home.
Which we all love.
Yeah. And at the time, like I said, my children, we had found a school for them where we liked the ideas of it's a charter school, but they couldn't walk to it. There's not a bus that would take them, so we'd have to take them every day. They had already been going to that school, and some of that was on my wife every single day to drive them, pick them up, and all the other things. Plus, she works also sometimes. She's not full-time, but so decided to jump in and try it and see if it would, at least give it a good year or so and see how it helped, see how I liked it and see how it helped the family. And that's kind of how I have it.
Awesome. How many years have you been in UR for now?
I've been doing it for just a little over 4 years. I hit my 4-year mark in January. So
nice. Congrats. So that's a decent amount of time to really get a feel for the career route. So I like your story a lot. How So other than running for office, how else would you have people help get into this route? Because I think a lot of people are like, I don't have any previous experience
Uh,
in doing this. Actually, let's back up really fast first. And can you really quickly explain what a utilization reviewer is and does? So I'm apologize. That probably should have been my first question. But you want to really fast go through that, and then we'll talk about how people, if they don't have any experience, can get into this path.
yeah, sure. And sorry, it probably looks like I'm looking down. I'm trying to get used to looking at the camera
No,
on my
I'm the worst at
computer
that too.
and not
I
looking.
want to look at someone, so I'm the worst. I always look at my computer too, so it's
I feel like
okay.
I'm being rude to everybody that's watching. Why is he looking down? Um, so utilization. So there's utilization management. That's kind of the umbrella term for really anything and everything that has to do with the management of a skilled care claim. So
Okay.
that's gonna entail the reviewing. That's gonna entail the appeals. That's gonna cover, the people on that you don't even the agents that are intaking the information, the back end stuff where they're creating the clinical guidelines and the all the paperwork that we make all the therapists do and all that kind of stuff. That's all of that together is utilization management. Um, so the part that I do most of the time for my workday would be considered clinical review. And really what it is depending on the health plan. I mean, the company I work for Evacor. It used to be Landmark when I first started. It's now been transitioned many times. Some other names you might be familiar with: CareCore, Care Connections, and then Evacor. They've also merged with Paladin or Palladium, I think it's called. And they just, if you haven't, you may have seen it in the news, they actually merged with Express Scripts, which also merged with Cigna. So
Okay.
I think technically, I mean, for the most part, I still work for Evacor. But I think over time, a lot of those things may merge with those big companies. But it's kind of everything in healthcare is going that way. The big fish buy out the little fish. But
Oh, of course. I
um,
know the big healthcare companies. So
yeah.
what exactly does your typical job entail? So like give me like a day in the life of Aaron, besides dropping your kids off and all that stuff, just the work stuff.
Just the work stuff. Um, yeah, and just kind of as a side note, I did one of my articles on my blog. I kind of wrote about what my day is like, so people can go and check that out too. But so I have a computer system at home that I log into. It's a secured server, so I have to use the computer system they sent me, and it kind of automatically logs me in, and I use passwords and whatever else. Check my emails just like anywhere else. Make sure that there's nothing I'm missing. There haven't been changes or updates to health plans or things like that that I need to be aware of. And then from there, I log into a specific server where all of the actual skilled care requests are held. And then I can literally I hit a button and a case will come up in front of me, and it will be it'll show the history of all the requests that patient has had for skilled care, basically rehabilitation of any kind. So physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech. That's mainly what the system that I work with, it will show. An open case, like I said, an open case will come up. I dive into that case and look at what the provider sent. So we contract with specific health plans, and those health plans have specific rules that they want us to follow, also what they want the providers to follow, paperwork to fill out. Most providers are kind of familiar with some of those different forms. We're not the health plans we deal with are not the only ones that use forms. So, but I look at that clinical information, and then from there, make a determination on whether to fully approve it, partially approve it, or not approve anything, put it on hold if they didn't send enough information. And we just we just repeat that over and over with different cases that come in. I could get a knee replacement case for the first one, then the next one could be for a stroke. Next one could be for, well, I should say a patient that had a stroke, right? Be politically correct. I
Okay.
only do. We have a separate team that does pediatric So we have pediatric physical therapists and occupational therapists that do those. We do, the company I work for, we do have some speech therapists. They do all of the speech requests.
Okay, now I have a question. So
Yeah.
would a PT who's in this role also be reviewing OT charts, or how do they hire? Like, do they hire OTs to review OT charts, speech therapists to review speech charts? Do you know how that works?
Yeah, so I can review anything that's basically orthopedic or kind of mobility, like impaired mobility involved, some neurologic. So like I said, I can get a case for someone that has had a stroke or maybe a neurologic condition, MS, something like that. And the provider may be sending it in for either the physical therapy benefit or for occupational therapy. And I could review either of those.
Okay.
But yeah, if it's like a pediatric one, I don't do those because I've never had pediatric experience outside of school.
Yeah, that's a little bit more specialized, I would think. Yeah.
And then, yeah, some of the occupational therapy ones, if it's for something really specifically occupational therapy, like maybe they're working on mental processing, some of the more specific, I can't even think of what it's called, but they've got their own specific protocols and things that they follow. Then usually I won't do those. So we certainly hire physical therapists and occupational therapists, and then from there kind of divvy out and determine what it is that they would do. And then there's a whole separate team that does speech. I've never even looked in a speech case. I could pull it up, but I don't know that it would mean anything to me.
Yeah, Sharice is saying the same thing. She says she's an OT and she does chart reviews as well. And so she reviews PT and OT requests, but doesn't do speech. That she really doesn't feel comfortable with that. So I actually really like that factor because I feel like as healthcare professionals, we're always sort of put into these roles where we're maybe not comfortable. And so I really like the fact that they're, at least some companies are giving you an option where you're like, no, I don't have that knowledge. I can't review that chart. So I like that. Cynthia was asking, can you only review charts in the states that you're licensed, or are you reviewing services in different states? Does like your PT license even matter also? I don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be licensed to hold the job. And they require me to send in proof of licensure every 2 years because that's when it renews in my state. It depends on the state and the state rules and the state health insurance commissioner. Each state, that's kind of, they might have a different name, but the health insurance commission, they have their own specific rules as well as to whether or not they can be reviewed by the same state or out of state. So for example, we have some of our health plans work in South Carolina. South Carolina has a specific rule. So we have to have South Carolina. The cases can only be reviewed by a provider in South Carolina.
Okay. And I'm sure whoever you work for, like if those of you listening are interested, I'm sure that, your employer is going to know all these rules and regulations, and they're going to, piece out, the charts based upon those different rules and regulations. So you really don't have to worry. The employer should be taking most of that up. Now, besides, are there any other roles under utilization management besides just reviewing charts? Do you know of anything else? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's other things that I've definitely worked on. Currently, I also work on appeals. So let's say, myself or one of the other therapists had made a determination that the therapist on the other end does not agree with, because that would never happen, right? That provider office has the opportunity, and actually the patient, they have the right as well, whether with or without the provider, to request a reconsideration or an appeal, and those are kind of a different level. So there's the initial determination, then there's a reconsideration, and then after the reconsideration, there's an appeal, and each of those are going to be based on the health plan rules and state rules as well. But The review is kind of similar, but really you're going back and you're trying to determine if your coworker made a correct decision based on the information that was there. Oftentimes the provider will try and send additional information as well. Sometimes they forgot to send something. Maybe it wasn't very clear, or on the first one they didn't send anything at all. And so that was the reason for it not being approved. So then they send in the information, and that information needs to be reviewed. So there's those. I also have done where I've looked at an entire, what would you call it? Well, really, I mean, some health plans still do tiering, where their provider will be tiered on their utilization and whether or not they have to get prior authorization. So maybe there's like a tier A, B, or C. Tier A, those offices are doing well enough. They're utilizing their visits. They're managing very well, so they don't require authorization. But maybe a tier B or C does. There's a few health plans where they have contracted with EviCore to kind of help determine who should be tiered at what level.
Okay.
So what we would do for that role is the health plan will identify providers that are suspect. Let's use that word. And then they would send those to us, and then we would contact them and say, send us. We can get a list of patients, then we can pick out a few that we want them to send their entire
sort of
episode.
like an audit. You sort of like an audit.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
So it's like an audit. But we would audit like 4 or 5 patients for that facility, try and look at patterns of care, and then from there, kind of tell the health plan our recommendation on what tier we think they should receive, if they should move up or move down.
Okay.
What else? I've also worked on creating. So each company that does clinical review, they're supposed to have some kind of a guideline. And it's really interesting. Some of the guidelines I've seen are very sparse. Some are very detailed. But over the past 2 years, I've been working on updating the clinical guidelines that we have as well with several of the other therapists I work with. So, and that's like research, pulling up evidence and reading through it and trying to figure out if that would even, how that would apply to making decisions. There's not a lot of really good research in physical therapy and occupational therapy, especially that talks about dosing. The most that there really is like pediatric and some neurologic, but we try to create some kind of a guideline that is research based, so that we're not just pulling a number out of our hat or saying, well, this provider seems like a nice guy, so we're going to give him more visits than the other one.
Yeah, that's actually, as you were talking, that was one of the questions that popped up. And everyone, I see your questions. I promise I will get to them. But that actually was one of my questions. Like, how do you know who to approve and who to deny? Like, when you get hired, do they give you an onboarding course or class where they're like, here's sort of how you go about approving, how you go about denying? Here is, like you said, the guidelines. How did you how did you get the information to know what to do in your job? Because I definitely don't know how to approve or deny. I'd be like, everyone's approved. You're all good.
Well, at first, I went through about, how long was it? I can't remember now. I went through I think it was a good 2 weeks of training before I ever even made my first determination on my own.
Okay.
And basically I basically kind of watched a more senior reviewer and kind of what they did and how they made their decisions, looked at, the clinical guidelines that we had and a lot of that kind of stuff. And then from there, I kind of moved into where I would do the review, but then the therapist was still kind of there saying, I think, you might have missed a little bit of information here, maybe think about this, maybe think about that. And then we would make the determination together. A lot of the decisions are, we need to try and base them off of what would be considered standard of care. So similar to what you might find in a definition for skilled care, like with Medicare or some of the more major health plans, which again is really hard to define because we don't have really good research to make that definition. So we have to go based off of, kind of what, like a middle area of what standard of care is. We could take I could take one area of the country. Their standard of care might be 3 times a week for 12 weeks.
Yeah.
But then another part of the country, their standard of care might be 1 time a week. Or if you look at people that are, more a practice that is more numbers driven, kind of like a patient mill, if we want to use that term, their standard of care is going to be very different than maybe a private manual therapist or someone that's only seeing patients once a week.
So that actually brings me to another question. Like, so with all these different standardizations, do you feel like there's a pressure to deny claims? Like, do you ever feel that way, or how do you feel like your company is in terms of that? Because I think that's the biggest fear people have with this is that, always denying claims, I think would start to get depressing, to be frank. And so do you feel that pressure? Can you explain that a little bit? I don't know.
Sure. I mean, the company that I work for, I can't speak for all the other ones. Sorry, I'm shaking my desk. And the other clinical reviewers that I've talked with that work for other companies, I have never heard of a company that pressures someone to deny care. It's very explicit when I was hired, and every year when I do my compliance, I have to sign an attestation that I recognize that I am not getting any kind of reimbursement based on the decisions that I make or the number of decisions that I make. The number of
denials that you make.
Denials that I make, or a specific number of approvals that I make.
Gotcha.
They certainly track, they track that we're being productive in making decisions, but not what the decision is per se.
That's really good to know.
Yeah, and I've never felt pressured to deny care. A lot of times when it's being denied, it's pretty obvious that, this patient, either the patient is doing really well and this provider's just stretching things along, or there's no information at all to make a decision. So we have to deny it basically to force the provider's hand to send us the information, so then we can make a review.
That's huge, because I had that misconception, and I'm sure a lot of people on the webinar right now had that misconception or that concern. So that's actually really, really great to know. Also, let's see here. I'm going through really fast. Okay, yeah, and another person is saying that, that's the same thing, that they weren't, they're not giving her any issues. So we're getting a lot of similar feedback for those on the webinar. I'm in the chat here, and a lot of other people are saying the same thing with their companies too. So that's really good to know. And that's really good to know, actually, Aaron, too, that they train you. So is there almost like an expectation that you're not going to know what to do when you first get into the job? Like there's an expectation, like, yes, we're going to have to teach you the ropes, so to speak.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Because every company is going to have their own specific, especially their own specific software system that they use. And again, their own proprietary clinical guidelines. And even though they're proprietary, most of them, the providers need to be able to access those. So for those of you that are wondering what a clinical guideline is, you could go to the websites such as Evacor, or I don't know, Navi Health. They might also have it on their website. And you could actually find those clinical guidelines and look at them and see what it says. But I got several weeks of training before I even looked at cases. And then from there, I was someone was there watching me and helping me along for several months, doing just the review before I branched off to doing anything else, like a peer phone call or any of the other stuff. And it wasn't for a good close to a year being with the company that I helped with anything else, like the tiering or appeals and reconsiderations or any of that other stuff. So,
Okay. Now, Nicole asked a really good question. Can you expand upon the productivity measurement and demands? And that's actually a great question because, I'm thinking like a PT, like, oh, how many patients do we have to see? Is that the same thing for you? Like that you have to approve or deny, X amount or review X amount of charts per day? What's your productivity demands?
when I first started, my department really didn't even have a productivity definition. Over the past year or so, they've been working at it, and they still don't have a specific number. They kind of have a range. The cases can be very varied. So sometimes it'll be a first request with very little information, just enough. And it's like, that's pretty simple. They need visits. Go ahead and get started. You could fly through a bunch of those.
Okay.
But then let's say but then your next one could be someone that's been in care for like 4 or 5 months. And it's like, what's this provider doing? And they also sent you 80 pages to look through. And so that's going to take some more time. So averaging all that together, currently, the last average I heard where I work is we're at about 4 to 5 cases an hour. But that always changes. A lot of times, some things that really hold that up is you've got to double check different health plan rules and things like that, and you've got to use different systems and switch, and a lot of those things eat up time too. So they certainly, but for the most part, I think most companies, they certainly do track some kind of a productivity measure. Aside from, like I said, I don't think any of them are going to track how many denials you make or how much care you restrict.
Do you feel like that 4 reviews in an hour, is that like, do you feel like, because at work I'm like, all the time. Is that the same for you? Like, as you, I'm serious. Is that the same, or do you feel like that's a very fair productivity standard that you have?
No, I think it's pretty fair. I've never really felt pressured. And I think part of it is just that this whole productivity thing, at least where I work, is pretty new.
Okay.
But there's a pretty good understanding that with it being a mixed bag of what we review, that some days are going to be good, some days aren't, and the work that you get done is still going to be pretty varied. And until they can narrow it down to that kind of stuff, I would hope that I saw a question up there before that do I expect any change in utilization review? I would really hope, at least within my company, that it could get to the point to where, like myself, I would only be reviewing orthopedic cases, unless, if there was someone sick or there was a backflow, then I could step in and help out. But so that we specialized a little bit more in the reviews that we do. But yeah, I've never felt super pressured.
That's good. That's good. And I think that that's actually a great, hopefully that's the route that they go, is that, we're providing specialized care. We also need to have specialized reviewers, especially to understand the language, the different phrases that you use, can get pretty complicated. I promise I see a lot about recommended companies, so we'll get into hiring in a couple seconds. I have gotten a lot of questions about salary. And so do you want to briefly go into how your salary is structured? Is there any incentivization to review more charts, or is it hourly, salaried?
When I first started, it was purely salary. And then about 2 years in, they switched when they did one of the company mergers, they switched because a lot of the other reviewers that had merged with the company, they were hourly. So I'm currently now an hourly employee. I work 30 hours a week. Really, when I transitioned, I think I bumped up in pay a little bit from what I had clinically, so it wasn't a downgrade at all. And then it's just kind of, with it, one of the nice things with it being a big corporate company, we do have corporate annual raises based on, some of it is based on your own. You make your corporate goals and how it's going to affect the company, and that kind of stuff that you get in any corporation. And then it's also based on the whole company productivity for the whole year as well. But with us, at least, and I think for most other companies as well, especially if they're requiring you to be a licensed therapist that's doing review, they're going to pay you at least somewhat similarly to someone else that has a license that is still clinical. I do get benefits. I do get paid time off. You have to be, because I'm considered a full-time employee. Let's see what else. There's sometimes we get an annual bonus. Again, that's all based on how the company does as a whole. A lot of factors that probably I have nothing to do with, but.
So overall, you'd say, if you're an OT or a speech therapist or a PT, switching to this, it's pretty similar. Your pay, your benefits, all that's going to be pretty similar, except now your duty's just different. Instead of treating patients, you're more behind the scenes doing paperwork side.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to try to see, is there a sexy side to utilization reviewing?
You want me to take my shirt off? Is that what you're saying?
No, please, no.
Oh, now you're saying I'm ugly anyway.
But no, I'm going red here now. But no, but what is the most interesting part of your day? Why do you like being a utilization reviewer, or why do you like doing what you're doing right now?
For me, I think it's interesting to see what's going on throughout the country. So, like I said, we review for several health plans. Many of these health plans are pretty major, like Cambia. We don't do every single one of their health plans, but they're a pretty big company out in the Pacific Northwest and West. But also some of the Blue Cross plans, some WellCare plans for those of you that are back east. So I get to see reviews from almost every state in the nation, and that gives me a chance to see what's going on, what areas regularly overutilized, what areas don't, who treats how. So I find that pretty interesting. But then the other thing that kind of really keeps me going is that when you see a case that is really blatantly, it's like, this is not what physical therapy is. This might sound a little macabre, but it's almost like, it almost makes my heart feel good that I denied that care. I'm a really nice guy. I don't want to make it sound like that. And like I said, I don't deny very often. It's not something that you really have to do very frequently, but sometimes you see, sometimes you see it's like I said, it's pretty obvious. You're going to see cases where it's like this patient is, their functional scores are actually pretty good. But then the provider's plan of care is still like 3 times a week. And I'm like, well, for what? I mean, the patient is doing, it says that I've had one before where it said that the patient had just gone skiing and the provider is still wanting to see him 2 times a week for 8 more weeks. I'm like, well why?
Yeah. If you can ski, especially if you're going on a black diamond, no, you're good.
Yeah. So even though it's being hard on a fellow provider, those are the providers that are making it hard for the rest of us. Those are the ones that are making therapy look bad in the eyes of those that are paying for therapy. So a lot of us are complaining about how the health plans are so nasty, and they're doing all this stuff about, they're not paying us what we deserve. Some of that is true, but there are a lot of providers that are overutilizing, and they are making every single one of the rest of us look terrible. It's like the one bad apple can spoil a bunch. Well, yeah, there are some bad apples that are totally, completely rotten to the core, that are treating people like crazy. And so being able to do something about that, even if it is just denying one case, maybe, at least that's something. So that's kind of what keeps me going most days.
Okay. That's a good answer. And maybe
wasn't very sexy, was it?
I didn't say it. You said it. No. But I think that's you have to always see the bright side in jobs and how you're actually contributing to society and how you're helping more globally. And I think it'd be actually really interesting maybe to have utilization management companies try to help therapists, and I'm just brainstorming, like try to help them understand, what they're doing wrong and what they're doing right. But maybe those therapists know and they're just being pressured or, etc. But okay, so I think hopefully we've gotten a pretty good idea as to how you transition, how much money you make, sort of a day in the life, the pros, cons. So if you want to get a job that's a good question. Really quick, can assistants do this? Can CODAs or PTAs do this?
For the company that I work for currently, we do not have any that are being hired because we are making decisions based on a plan of care. And they, at least I think in still all 50 states, last I've heard, they're not able to make or adjust a plan of care.
Okay.
I have heard of some companies that do allow some assistance to do some of the process, and I would hope that in the future, I think they would be very helpful in doing some of the initial review process in some of the things that we do. But personally, I'm not in a position to make any kind of that change at the company I work with yet, but maybe a few years down the road.
Okay. And that makes sense. Brenda's asking, can you be a little bit more specific with the salary? Like you think it's like typical PTs and OTs and speech therapists are making maybe 70,000 to 80,000 a year, or what would you say, Aaron? If you can
Well,
divulge.
did President Trump ever divulge his tax records? He didn't. I'm not.
Okay, you can give a
No,
range. It's okay.
So they're a national company, so they do take into account what region you live in. So I don't know specific numbers, but I know that like the therapists that work with me that live in, say, California or Florida, they get paid more than me, but they also their
Cost of living. Yeah.
their cost of living is a lot higher than mine. We've got a couple that live in San Diego, and then like I wouldn't want to live there anyways, but because they're everything there is going to be super expensive. I am. Let's see.
How about a big range, like 50 to 80? 50 to 80K?
I mean, that 50 is kind of low.
Okay.
I would say it's probably 65 to 80, over.
Okay.
And I'm probably about in the middle of that. And then depending on how long you work.
Of course, it's if you have extra credentials, if you have more experience, all of the above is going to help change that.
Negotiate better than I probably did.
So let's talk more about sort of the transition into like getting the job. So do you have any like tips or any helpful advice for someone wanting to transition out of clinical care and into being a utilization reviewer or clinical reviewer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I get emails quite frequently because I had been featured in a post by Meredith Kasten on her website. And so from there, I get emails quite a lot. And so I'm familiar with a lot of these questions. One of the first things that I get asked a lot is how to get experience. So if I've never done review and I can't get a review job, well, I had never done review when I got my job. A lot of the people that worked with me had never done reviewing either. Some of them had, and they were transitioning from one company to another. But so one of the first things a couple of things that I recommend is if you are currently in a clinical setting, is to go to your employer and ask if you can participate in any kind of internal chart auditing or internal compliance auditing or something that you could then list on your resume that you had then worked with actual chart reviewing. And just let them know that you want to get involved in more of the reimbursement and outcome side where you work. And hopefully they would be willing to work with you on that end. Another suggestion, like I did, is look into volunteering with your state association, whether it's the PT, OT, speech association. Most of those state boards are going to have some kind of a payment or a reimbursement or a compliance chairperson. And a lot of times those chairpersons will also have a committee underneath them, which will need, a lot of times the committees are just volunteers that don't even run for position. That chairman can just go ahead and assign them to the committee and start getting them doing some things. And from there, you may interact with different payers or things like that that could then, it could lead you somewhere. And then you could also look into volunteering with your national association. I mean, the APTA, they have a whole department devoted to payment and policy. Most of that department is they're going to be paid employees. That's their job all the time. But there are always, APTA is always looking for volunteers, and I assume that the other associations are as well. Whether it's reimbursement related or not, it shows that you are dedicated to the profession more than just being clinical. And then also a couple other things to think about is, are you helping run like journal clubs where you work, or any kind of evidence-based club or thing outside of work? It's going to show that you understand the literature and that you're willing to look into it. So those are some of the things that I recommend as far as getting experience if you don't already have any.
And how about, oh, go for it. Sorry. Go ahead. Keep going.
I was going to transition into like resumes and some job searching ideas.
Oh yeah, go for it. And then also growth. Like if someone wants to like, how do they, because I feel like as PT OTs, we sort of are stuck in clinical. Like if we wanted to grow and expand our career in UR, like, is there a potential for that? Like, is there a potential for upward movement?
Yeah, I mean, the company that I work with, there's some potential. I don't know about others. I think if the company was purely rehab based, there would be a little bit more upward movement. And I mainly just say that because the company I work for, Evacor and basically Cigna, their bread and butter is full medical review, not just physical therapy. So think of it like a hospital where the physical therapists generally found, the basement, right? Or they have a closet office somewhere. They're just not, they're not the big money maker. So the company that I work for, a lot of the other departments, they have career plans and they have upward movement. Physical therapy, or the rehab department where I work, doesn't really have one right now.
Okay.
They are currently working on it. And I think if you're willing to be like a trailblazer, if you finally get hired somewhere, then that opens up possibilities. So I get questions a lot about resumes and what to do as far as a resume is concerned, especially if you don't have a lot of that experience, right? First thing first is that you're not applying for a clinical job. So even though you are a clinician and you'll be reviewing clinical notes, you're not going to be treating patients. So you can certainly list if you have like an OCS, or if you're a fellow of whatever manual therapy group, or something like that. You could list it and touch on it quickly. But at the end of the day, that doesn't necessarily matter, because these companies know that regardless of whatever your certification is, that utilization is all over the board.
Okay.
They will see requests from specialists that are overutilizing like crazy, and then they see requests from people that have no specialization at all that utilize very little. So not to say anything bad about specializations, I'm just saying that probably isn't what you want to necessarily highlight.
Okay.
So you want to highlight whatever you see in the job description. So if the job description is asking you about your clinical knowledge, or if you've done any kind of reviewing or auditing, or at least throw those words in there somehow, that you've helped with chart auditing, that you've helped with, or that you are part of a journal club, or that use that description to help you write your resume.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah. That's great topics. And also, this is amazing information. And Meredith, she just created a utilization reviewer starter pack, which you can use and visualize all the things that Aaron's talking about. It's got the resume, the cover letter, interview prep, and search, basically like 25 search terms to really help you discover these sort of potential jobs out there, because they can sometimes be hard to find. So I put that link in the chat, and I highly recommend mend that starter pack, because that's going to be super helpful and give you a head start. But keep going, Aaron.
Yeah, and being if the job description is asking for a certain specialty of therapist, so sometimes, like I said, we have a specific department that does pediatric, or for a while there, we were looking specifically for someone that had lymphedema specialty, because that's so off to the side of things that that's a review that I don't feel comfortable handling. I've never done it. So if it does see that, then of course you want that listed in your resume, and you want to list that anyways. But and there's a lot of resources out there about resume writing, so I don't want don't take my word for it to completely go and research that like Emma posted there. But job searching, so for me, it was all about the networking. I had never even looked for a job online as far as clinical review had been concerned, really. I think I'd made one or two searches after I had talked to the representative of EviCore at the time, and I was like, well, if they're looking, maybe someone else is looking. So I looked a little bit and I was like, well, I'm not finding anything, which is really common to what I'm hearing now, is people are having a hard time finding the jobs. First, know that as far as clinical review is concerned, and even utilization management, there's probably not enough to go around right now. I mean, they're very sought after. So I consider myself extremely lucky. And it was all down to the networking that I had done. So some places to network, again, would be your national association. Like I said, APTA, I don't know about the other ones, but they have a payment and policy section specifically. You could go onto the association website and find those emails, and even just talk to those people and say, hey, I'm interested in getting into clinical, non-clinical work. How do I go about this? Do you have any contacts? Same thing with your state associations. Whoever your board reimbursement and payment person, the person that would have been in my position that I had been elected to, reach out to them too. A lot of times they don't really do a whole lot. I mean, the job that I got elected to, it didn't take a lot of time. So I had plenty of time that I could have responded to members' emails. Another thing is that most state associations are going to hold some kind of a payer session during one of their annual conferences. I'm not going to say all of them, but when I would go to the national payment conferences, one of the discussions we would have is, what are you doing at your state policy, payment and policy conferences? And there'd be representatives from probably 15 to 20 different states that were saying different things about what they were doing at the state level at their conferences. So if there is, get in touch with your state associations and find out if they're having any kind of a payment thing going on each year. Because most of those things are attended just by front office staff.
Okay.
So that's another place you could network with as well. Who are your billers? Who are your coders? And what conferences are they going to? Health plans. Most health plans do provider education annually. So they're going to update providers on what changes with the health plan, how to submit your authorizations, and those kinds of things. And again, I would say, at least from what I've heard, almost all the attendees, they're front office people, but they are provider education sessions. So providers can most certainly attend those, unless unless it says something else specifically. And that's where, you would be rubbing shoulders with people at the health plan, the ones that communicate with those that review. And so you could certainly get some contacts there.
Awesome.
Let's see, what other notes did I have?
No, I mean, that's really great. We're hitting the hour mark almost. So any last minute questions, type them in. Otherwise, Aaron, I mean, I've been just pew pew shooting questions at you the whole time. So I appreciate you just answering all these questions so quickly, so honestly, and really in such great detail. Any last questions, quickly post them in the chat. And then, before we go, I do want to share with you guys that Meredith did create this really awesome, and hopefully it's showing up in your screen here, this really awesome utilization reviewer starter pack. And it's got everything that you need to have to start your career and to get a job in utilization reviewing or in clinical reviewing. It's got the resume, sample cover letter, interview prep questions, and it's just a wealth of knowledge. It's got how to help you search as well, 25 key search questions also for when you're job hunting to find that. So you can hit that or the link that I posted in the chat if you want to get that starter pack. But looks like there's no more questions here. Aaron, thank you so much for just being an amazing guest and sharing all your information. And I have to give a shout out for Aaron too. If people have more questions, where should they go to find you as well? awittypt.com or?
Yeah, so they could go to awittypt.com. I can't spell it if it's not written out. I'm one of those visual people. awittypt.com. And there's links to my email there. There's also links to Instagram. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. My handle at both of those are awittypt. I did see a really quick question up there about applying for, if it says an RN only. That is very common. There are a lot of jobs, even where I work, that I think I would be very well qualified for, that they only hire RNs for. I'm actually working at that. I'm working on that in the back end where I work right now.
Awesome.
To see if that could change. But I would say apply. I'm not going to say you're ever going to hear back, but I think the more they see therapists applying for these things, they might start to think, I wonder what's going on here. From what I've been able to find out, the reason that these jobs are slated for RNs is it's basically just tradition. A lot of these companies don't really understand what rehab professionals do, and the only way to educate them is we've got to kind of put our face into their face, and let them see who we are. So, but yeah, that's so I wanted to touch on that question. But yeah, so you can reach me at that website. You can find my email. You can reach out to me there. Find me on Facebook, either at awittypt, or you can find me just at Aaron Hackett. You can send me a message.
But it has to be a witty message, only a witty message.
Yeah, should I explain what that's all about at all? Or?
Sure, go for it.
I mean, it's Saturday and my wife is working and my kids are doing their chores, so I've got all the time in the world. I don't know how much time you have in the conference room, but
couple more minutes.
So in doing all of this review work, I started to see a lot of the problems, like I was mentioning, with overutilization, or even just providers that don't really understand what skilled care means when it's involved with managed care. Someone managing the payment of that care. So at the I had been thinking about doing something, trying to educate people, or at least trying to put my voice out there. Not super technologically advanced. Emma will certainly agree to that. We had some hiccups in the back end that no one noticed. I finally got on here 1 minute before the conference start. So, but during Christmas break, I took a whole week off. I took a week off of work, partially to be home with kids and things like that. And then the rest of my time, I built a website myself on WordPress. And that's the website you will see when you go to awittypt.com. But also during that time and before that, I'm kind of I try to be a funny guy at times. I have a sarcastic side. It's kind of come back to bite me sometimes. But so as a hobby, I've always been a little bit artsy, painting and drawing. So I've been designing T-shirts also.
Yes, I saw. They're really good. I was going to mention it.
I'm wearing.
Yeah.
So I also wanted somewhere that I could also post those t-shirts if anybody had been interested in purchasing. So I started my own website, put some t-shirts up as well. And so I have a blog where I try and use a little bit of wit and humor to help people understand skilled care and managed care, because that's a subject that I think part of the reason people don't understand it is because it's boring. Nobody cares about it. It's not sexy. That's why my shirt's not off. Why I designed t-shirts so people can wear shirts when they're not sexy. So just to find a way to kind of make it a little bit more upbeat, and make it a way that people can learn and understand, but still enjoy reading it, as opposed to like if you've ever tried to read like the Medicare handbook or something, I mean, holy cow, I think I'd rather read my mortgage.
Oh, yeah.
I think I'd rather read my mortgage than read the Medicare handbook. So that's kind of the goal. That's kind of the dream. Just started it, like I said, Christmas break. The website launched January 3rd. Instagram launched about the same time. And I don't have a whole lot of followers and stuff like that. So just trying to work on all of that first and then see where it goes from there. That's
Great. Yeah.
That's where the witty part comes from.
No, I've had a lot of people have mentioned your blog, and I love the fact that you're bringing to light these issues, but with a little sexy flair on top of it. So that's great. That's great. Well, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Thank you again, Aaron. Check out Aaron's blog, awittypt.com, and also get that utilization reviewer starter pack to really, if this is the career route and you've been inspired by this webinar, get started now and take a look at that. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'll hopefully see you in the next webinar. Bye.
Thanks, Emma. Bye, everybody.